The following program may contain adult language and mature subject matter and does not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
Someone reached in and grabbed it. Was a rock lobster. Rock lobster. Rock lobster.
Welcome to Beyond the Mundane with your hosts Elsie Lynn Leyland and Randy St. Clair, right here on Reality Radio 101. To contact the ladies live right now, dial 905-725-1907. Toll free in North America, 1-866-905-7325. Worldwide, 1-866-656-5477. Email the ladies, realityradio101 at yahoo.com. And now, your hosts of Beyond the Mundane, Elsie Lynn Leyland and Randy St. Clair.
Good evening and welcome to the show. We're very pleased to have on this show this evening a brilliant young filmmaker, Daniel Roher, who will be talking to you about some of his productions. But first, we're going to get at it. Right, Else?
Ooh, get at it.
Yeah.
What are we getting at this time?
So on the weekend, I went to the lake down and I saw all these people in their swimsuits. Now, I have to say, some of the people, it's really interesting to see what they're wearing, and some of the people, I wish they would not be there in their swimsuit. Let me give you an example. It was a beautiful summer day, and on these chase lounges was this babe. I mean, she was blonde, bombshell. She wasn't wearing that much, and she looked really good in her two-piece bathing suit. Beside her was her man, and he obviously has money, because he was wearing this tiny little bathing suit and he had quite a gut on him. But he felt that he looked really, really good. And as I was walking by, I said to myself, please don't get up. I really don't want to see this. And do you know what happened?
He got up.
He got up.
Just
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. And I tell you, it was not a pretty sight.
So you are offended by
No.
skin?
I'm just making observation. Now, people say if you've got it, flaunt it, right? Okay. So what about people who, you know, the guys that wear that kind of sarong kind of thing? What is that called? That kind
the
of
dress thing or
no,
the thong
the
thing?
thong thing, the thong bathing suit.
Oh,
kind
like
of thing.
the banana sack?
Yes, the banana sack. I saw somebody wearing that, and it was just gross because at the crack of their butt, you could barely see any fabric. So my mind is wandering, and I'm thinking, that is just so gross.
Well,
But please don't turn around because I don't want to see the front because you've got zits all over the back of your butt.
Ew.
So I don't want to see the front, right?
Okay.
Okay. So then as I walked a little bit further, there were some women who obviously have had some work done up top, and they had bathing suits, string bikinis that barely covered anything.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it just was a bit much. What do you think about string bikinis on the top when you've obviously had some work done?
Well,
What do you think about that?
Well, I find it funny because when I was living in Europe, basically everybody sunbathed in the nude. So if you thought that was bad, the old fat guy with nothing on is really more entertaining.
Well, I've been to nude beaches. I have. And everybody's doing the same thing. And they're letting it all hang out.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're prepared for that mentally when you go there, right? But when I'm walking by with my ice cream cone or whatever, I am not prepared to see this, right? And I don't know, it just sort of...
Did you have your bathing suit on?
No, I didn't.
Why
no,
not?
Because I was just down at the beach, right? But I just made all these observations as I went by. And people seem to feel that they can wear anything down at the beach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But
well, you can go topless.
Yes, I know, but they're just exposing everything. And there are some people, sorry, in my opinion, that should not be exposing a lot of what they have. It just is not eye candy, let me tell you.
But I don't think they do it because they think they're being eye candy. I think they do it because they worship the sun.
Yeah, okay.
There are people that have absolutely no ego when it comes to their body.
Right.
They have no problem changing naked in the change room at the gym.
That's true.
They have no problem showering at the gym with no curtain.
True.
Or being in the sauna naked.
Yes.
And I think it's really has nothing to do with body image at all. I don't think they have a body image. I don't think they think about it. Their ego it doesn't go there at all.
Really?
Yeah.
So are they just flaunting what they have?
No, they don't. It's not flaunting at all. They just don't think the body is a problem.
Well, that's true. But when you're eating your ice cream cone and you see something that's not a pretty sight, it kind of puts you off your food a little bit, right?
But then again, you could see a little 3-year-old running down the boardwalk with their nose running down to their chin, and
that I could handle.
Really? That
but
I can't.
What got
handle.
me was this guy obviously,
or a dog drooling.
That would be okay. But this guy with his babe, okay, he obviously has money.
Can I just say something real quick?
Yes.
I'm a little offended by that insinuation. Just
Why?
Because he is with a really good-looking woman.
Yeah.
You automatically jump to the conclusion that he must be enormously wealthy. What happens if he's just a genuinely good man?
I didn't jump to that conclusion.
You did.
Because I saw him get up and I saw the car that he went to. It was an expensive car. And he had an expensive chase lounge.
Ah.
Right?
Well, that's a detail you left out.
Yes. So I'm all about not judging people in terms of their money or whatever. But what I'm getting at here is, from my perspective, I feel that he felt because he had money, he could wear whatever he wanted. That's what I'm just putting out there. So he was wearing the smallest of bathing suits and he had the biggest of gut. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know. I guess because of spending time in Europe, I see that every day.
Right.
There was 80-year-old men wearing thongs like that, and then stripping them off to sunbathe or go swimming naked.
Yeah.
And it was so common. And
and
if they are from European background, it was probably fairly normal.
Let's also not lose sight of the fact that beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this young bombshell could find this man who you found to be abhorrent totally attractive.
Well, yes, she probably did, but I'm just saying, from my perspective, it would have been better for him if he didn't have a bathing suit on, because the bathing suit was almost obscured from the gut that was hanging over. Not that I have anything against size or anything like that.
But he's just working on the tan line, man.
It
sounds like you have a little something against people who are bigger and still try and go to the beach and enjoy themselves.
No, I have something against people that are letting it all hang out when I feel that if you're going to the beach, it would be good to be a little bit more properly dressed. That's what I'm saying. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I don't have that weird body image thing.
Yeah.
My friends are a million different sizes,
right.
and so many of them would wear the thong or the Speedo that's too small because they really don't want the tan line. If this guy has a gut, that means the back of his pants is going to sink down. So when he wears his golf shorts, he could, when he bends over, show a bit of back, and he doesn't want a white mark.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So from my point of view, I would say that's what he's working at.
Randi, what do you think would be an appropriate attire? You said that maybe people should monitor and sort of recalibrate what it is they're wearing to the beach, if not a small revealing bathing suit.
Well, I don't really like small Speedos on men. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I find...
And how about string bikinis on women?
String bikinis are okay.
Why?
Well, I have a problem with that.
Why?
Because, well, why should women be able to wear comfortable, revealing clothing that makes them feel sexy?
Right.
And men have to cover themselves up a little bit more.
They don't have to. It's just my personal opinion.
Oh, I see.
My personal opinion. As a fashion choice, I feel that men would look better in more of a full trunk.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Ah.
More of a full trunk of bathing suit, right?
But then they'll have white marks above their knees and high on their waist.
Yes.
I don't know. When you want to worship the sun, like if you're a beach goer, you're going to worship the sun.
Right, yeah.
And I really think that they wouldn't, that's what they're considering.
Right.
And guaranteed they're probably eating tons of carrots to protect their skin, too.
Carrots to protect their skin? What are you talking about?
It's amongst Europeans, it's well known to eat a lot of carrots to increase the keratin in your skin so you don't have to wear sun protection sunblock, which could be detrimental to your health because of the chemicals in it.
Well, now that you mention it, he had a little lunch bucket and there were carrots in it and he was eating it.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Yeah, so he's a sun worshiper. That's all it is. There's no other thing to it. And when it comes to older men and younger women, I got to tell you, in my world of being the younger woman with the older man, I've always had that life. You know, I've been with Carl since I was 19 years old.
Yes.
And I don't see anything wrong with it.
I don't see anything wrong with it either. I'm just saying, for a visual for me, a man in a Speedo doesn't do it for me. Sorry. A man in trunks, yes, because there's a little bit more to the imagination, right? But the Speedo just doesn't do it.
Yeah, but then I've seen these hot bod guys, and they have no brain. I want a man that's going to stimulate my brain, so I don't care what he looks like.
What do you mean hot bod men that have no brains?
These guys that are, going to look decent on the beach to make you feel comfortable.
Right.
They don't always have what's in the brain to help with the bod. So it wouldn't do nothing for me.
And you would know this from intense research?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I've got a lot of single friends.
From my intense research, the older man that's wearing a Speedo is compensating for something. That's my opinion.
How could he be compensating for something? You can see it all.
I know. So he's compensating for something.
It's not like the giant car.
And the giant car. He had the giant car, too.
He had a Hummer.
Yeah. He had a big car.
He didn't have a Hummer, though.
He had an expensive big car.
Yeah.
Right.
Well.
So, in my opinion, gentlemen, we can do without seeing you in the little Speedo. I never was a fan of it. I never found it attractive. I like the full trunks on a man. So that leaves a lot to the imagination.
Being the only gentleman at this
Yes.
table, I feel like I should interject and
Yes.
just give my personal opinion here. I think men and women should go to the beach and wear whatever they personally are comfortable with, regardless of what anyone else, a passerby or perhaps having an ice cream cone, may think.
And he might think, oh, my God, it's so revolting to watch someone eating ice cream dripping down their hand in the hot sun. So, I mean, the opinions swing both ways.
They do.
But myself, what people wear never affects me or offends me.
What people wear doesn't affect me or offend me, except when it comes to the Speedo bathing suit. For me, that's my one pet peeve about what people wear.
So that's your heebie-jeebie.
That's my heebie-jeebie, yeah.
So if I started to wear a thong around and no bra, you'd be upset with me?
No, that would be okay.
How can you say that?
That would be okay. It's just this Speedo thing, right? because it's just a lot of times, in my opinion, when people wear the Speedo, they're compensating for something.
Well, I knew a lot of guys that didn't compensate. There was a guy that I went to university with, and he was a professional swimmer.
Yeah.
And I tell you, this guy had the biggest, ever. And
the biggest what?
Penis. And he wore a Speedo because he was a racer. And I tell you,
now
I
wait
had
a minute. Wait a
time.
minute. He had the biggest penis around, and he wore a Speedo because he was a racer?
Yeah, a swim racer.
How do you...
Because he has to, for aerodynamics. So he has to get the top speed. So they shave their arms or shave their legs. And he had the biggest penis I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, so I thought you were going to go with the penis was somewhere for the aerodynamics. So that's what I was wondering about.
And
right.
I can tell you, it was really hard not to stare at this thing like it was a lollipop. It was
You probably were staring at like
I
lollipop.
did, and
yeah,
I was always embarrassed.
Yeah.
I was always embarrassed, but it wasn't because he was wearing a Speedo and shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
Because I think no matter what, I mean, he did the same thing. He
You know,
looked the same in his jeans.
His penis wasn't for aerodynamics. What it was a rudder.
A rudder.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah,
there
rudder.
So you bring forward a very important point. It's hard not to look right there at a man who's wearing a Speedo.
Yeah,
just saying.
But that was my problem. Yeah. It wasn't his problem.
It's hard not to just zero in on it. I'm telling you.
And I had to keep myself in check.
Yeah.
Not to stare at him like I'm staring down the barrel of a gun.
I know.
And so that was my problem. No, not his. Not at all.
But the whole dynamic changes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So for me, I'd rather have a man in swimming trunks. For me, okay, with a nice chest, lots of hair. Okay, hair. I don't know why people think hair isn't sexy. Hair is sexy. I love it. Okay, the more hair, the better.
Oh, that's good unless you get prickly rash.
Yeah, whatever. So, a man in trunks is nice with a nice chest, right? Good shoulders and a nice butt at the back. Okay.
And does he have to be a certain shape in the belly?
No.
So it's okay for him to have a big belly as long as he wears trunks.
Yeah, as long as he wears trunks. Then that is just wonderful.
So now Randi's put out a plea to all the men in Toronto to wear trunks so she can have the eye candy she wants. And does that mean you'll compensate them in some way for it?
No, I'm just saying...
will you give them a prize or an award?
I don't think we have enough prizes to give out for that. I would rather see a man naked.
Okay.
And I would rather see a man in swim trunks than in a Speedo.
Okay.
For me, that is just a visual for me that I don't like. It just doesn't do it for me.
So if I can regress you back to your childhood.
Oh, here we go.
Did you have a problem with somebody that had a Speedo at one time?
No, but I'm just saying you can't help but have your eyes drawn there. And when I'm having a conversation with a man, I want to be able to have a conversation with a man, right?
Oh, you see, I spent, 40 years with men having a conversation with my chest, and it doesn't bother me whatsoever. So I'm sure the guys that are having the conversation with you while they're in their Speedo and you're looking at their penis, that's fine with them.
Yeah, all right, okay. Now, the string bikinis, right?
Yeah, that's got me curious.
Okay, so you're at a public beach, okay? So the string bikini, I think, is a bit of a stretch because it's just a tiny little string bikini. Now, I saw some really nice bikinis on people, right? And for me, it was nice, right? But the tiny, tiny little string bikini, I think they just, personally, I think it would be nice to just have a little bit more fabric.
Did they have a
opinion.
Thong back or just the tie sides?
Tie sides, it was fine. Yeah. But I think for fashion, from a fashion perspective for me, it would look better with just a little more fabric. They can let most of it hanging out, but just a little more fabric.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Do you sleep in pajamas or do you sleep in the nude?
Nude.
Oh.
What about you?
Nude.
Okay, there you go. Right on. Okay, we're all for au naturel. So let's go on the record. People can wear whatever they want. It's just my personal request. If you're going to be at a beach near me, please, men in full trunks and ladies with just a little more fabric on your string bikini.
And from now on, I'll ask Randi to carry a flag while she's out there.
Yes.
And if you see her, approach her and see if you can get a prize.
There you go. There you go. I think it's time for a commercial and a song. And we'll be back with our wonderful filmmaker, Daniel Roher. Can't wait to talk to him. And you're listening to Beyond the Mundane Radio on realityradio101.com. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Are you in the GTA and looking for something fun, exciting, educational, and historical? Try the Muddy York Walking Tours, a series of themed walking tours through some of Toronto's most historically significant sites. Learn about the specters that roam the many old streets of Toronto on the Haunted Streets of Downtown Toronto tour, or learn about Toronto's dark, disturbing past in the Bloody York Crime and Punishment tour, or enjoy a walk on the sweeter side when you explore the many amazing chocolate shops and eateries on the Chocolate Tour of Toronto. Muddy York Walking Tours has more than a dozen unique tours to fit your interests. Many of the tours are only $15 per person, with special rates available for students and groups. Check out Muddy York Walking Tours online at www.muddyyorktours.com or give us a call and book your tour at 416-487-9017. Join the Muddy York Tour Group on Facebook for special events and exclusive behind-the-scenes invitations. Muddy York Walking Tours. Join us in exploring the city of Toronto.
Mandy's Toys and Things is a wonderful place to find great toys, awesome jewelry, and unique porcelain figures. There is a wide selection of items for the entire family. Come in and see our plush toys and action figures section for great buys, fantastic volume deals, and cheap prices. We are conveniently located at the Curtis Flea Market, 1696 Bloor Street in Curtis, Ontario. Building 2 at the back of the building. Open Saturdays and Sundays all year round. Mention this ad and receive 5% off. Only at Mandy's Toys and Things.
This half of the show is brought to you by Motivated Motion, located at the Curtis Flea Market. Motivated Motion carries Lynn Tucker's handmade silver and copper wire wrap jewelry, as well as her unique felt creations. They also carry a wide range of charms, jewelry, ritual altar supplies, crystals, gems, Himalayan salt lamps, incense, books, gifts, and much, much more. They've got the best prices in town. Mention Beyond the Mundane Radio and we pay the HST. Come on down to the Curtis Flea Market, booth 108, located at 1696 Bloor Street in Curtis, Ontario, every Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. Check us out and shop online at motivatedmotion.com and follow us on Facebook for access to special offers. Just go to facebook.com/motivated.motion.gallery. Spooky, supernatural, or spiritual, Motivated Motion has it all.
And now back to your hosts of Beyond the Mundane, Elsie Lynn Leyland and Randi Speedo St. Clair.
Well, you got me there. Welcome back to Beyond the Mundane. This is Elsie Lynn Leland, and Randi St. Clair is with me, and we're in the studio with Daniel Roher. He is a Toronto documentary filmmaker, and he's award-winning, and we want to talk at the beginning about a documentary that he's made called Kids of the Rocket Siren. And on our Facebook page, that is Beyond the Mundane Radio, you can link up to that video and watch it later after the show if you haven't already watched it. The most important thing for everybody to understand is I've asked Daniel to come on because what's happening in Israel is so horrific, meaning horrible terrific. And right now, and his documentary talks about a city called Sderot in Israel, right on the border, and it's the city that has the most amount of bomb shelters and the most amount of bombings, And he went and filmed this documentary there to really let us understand what it's been like for these children that never knew a generation without unrest and war. And this fear that they have. And it was an amazing documentary, worth the look. And I want to talk to Daniel about this because I think his insights from actually being there, talking to people, making friends with people there, and getting an understanding of the real vibration of emotion of what's going on with these people is poignant for us to understand what's happening. So welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you so much for having me.
First, I'm going to tell people you are the youngest documentary filmmaker I've ever met with the most amount of accreditation for your age.
Well, thank you very much.
Is it okay if I tell people how old you
Sure.
are? He's 21 years old, and he's got several documentaries behind his belt. And we'll talk about some of that stuff already in farther along in the show. But let's talk about...
But first I have to say, not to embarrass you or anything, is when I looked you up on the internet, you had a really cute picture, okay? And you're just as cute in person.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
So I want to let everybody know that. So when they go and check him out on the internet, yes, he's just as cute in person as he is. He's a little darling.
Yeah, but Daniel, don't tell her you wear a Speedo
Yeah.
at the beach.
Oh, I certainly won't.
Don't tell
I
her
never
that.
run into her on the boardwalk.
Because from Daniel's perspective, people should be able to wear whatever they want.
Well, that's true. I don't
Yeah.
like Speedos either, though. I gotta be honest with you.
Exactly.
So.
Thank you. Thank you. So,
Can you buy Speedos at Walmart, Gary?
Probably. Yeah. You know, I own a ton of stock in Walmart. That's why I support it. So,
Yeah,
Well,
maybe
you
you
know
can
what?
get
I
it-
support Walmart, too.
Yeah.
maybe you can get him at Bargain Barn.
Well, maybe I can get them at the used store up the street.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, okay. So anyways, you were asking him a very poignant question, were you not?
Yes.
Yes.
So talk to me about when you went to Israel. About what time frame was it?
Well, I was last in Israel. I've been there about 3 or 4 times. March of 2013. And that was a really unique time because in February of 2012, just a few months before I arrived, the last flare-up between Hamas, which is the terrorist militant group that right now governs the Gaza Strip, and Israel took place. So I was there while the ceasefire was being enforced. There was no fighting happening, thankfully, just a few skirmishes and a couple rockets that went awry in a farmer's field. And so I was right in the middle between that skirmish and this one. So the people who I got to know and who were very kind to me and letting me into their homes and lives and telling their stories just came off of an experience of having to spend a couple weeks in the shelters, of course, while the Army were carrying out their operation. So that was March of 2013.
So one of the things that really affected me with the documentary is that you had a mother talk about her life not living in Israel for the majority of it, yet her children having to have the state of war their whole lives and not understanding anything to do with being able to be free and make decisions that are based on normalcy.
Sure.
How did you feel about that, where you were growing up here and you had all these freedoms to do what you wanted?
Sure, it's a really interesting question. And what I really took away from the kids I worked with and the young people who I was able to meet and hang out with was the sheer resilience of these individuals growing up in such a hostile environment where they have, at a moment's notice, an alarm goes off. It's called Seva Edom, and they have 15 seconds to run to a shelter before a rocket could fall anywhere. And to you or I, someone who grew up in the safety of a wonderful country like Canada, where we have very fortunately never had to experience something like that, it's quite traumatic. And we can't imagine raising our children or having our loved ones in such an environment. But to the mothers and fathers and, of course, the children of Sderot and much of southern Israel, running to shelters is just a daily occurrence, and quite frankly, it's just part of life. So I'd be filming with the kids one day after school, and the car would backfire, and I'd jump thinking that there was an incoming rocket or some sort of explosion, and the kids would all laugh at me because, of course, they're used to it. And when an alarm does go off, the reaction is sort of the boys roll their eyes. Okay, let's pause the game. We'll go run over to the shelter, and that's it. So it's really amazing how resilient they are and how used to this situation the kids are.
I also noticed that they tend to have a maturity that is not like here for people their age.
And I think that's just a result of living in a situation where it is life and death on a daily basis. Now, fortunately, the Israeli government and the Israeli military, the defense forces, have worked very hard to ensure that civilian casualties are as low as they can possibly be. And that's why they are considering how many rockets have been fired at Israel from the Gaza Strip. There have been very few casualties. That's not to say there haven't been any. But it's still really frightening on a daily basis to have to run to these shelters and interact with these rocket sirens. It's a really foreign concept. But as I mentioned, the people get used to it. And the kids certainly are mature because a lot of them have been personally affected. The boy in my film, his name's Asaf. He's this really sweet, bubbly kid. His first cousin, Shiloh, who's also profiled in the film, was the first Israeli to be injured by a Hamas rocket. And it was sort of by the grace of God that baby Shiloh survived. And now he has scars and wounds all over his body. And they sort of bear a reminder as to what could have been and how fortunate his family was and he was that he survived 12 years ago.
And the strong responsibility his siblings take for him, you know, feeling so bad about, you know, mom and dad had to be at shul, so they were, you know, they were looking after him, and how horrible they felt. It
was a really difficult situation, but when we look at the conflict, now, of course, it's a very timely moment to be thinking about the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis. It's on the international consciousness right now as this horrible war is raging. But we can't lose sight of the fact that as difficult things are for the children in Israel and the kids in Sderot who have grown up in these shelters, a lot of the time it seems like, certainly now, the situation is far worse for the children in Gaza. And that's something that I would like to highlight, and that's just a reality of this conflict. And for situations far out of any child's control, they're in a situation where there's an active war going on in a densely populated area where civilian casualties are just a result of 1.8 million people being in a densely populated, very small little coastal enclave. And those civilian casualties are just a result. And it's really awful and it's really unfortunate.
And I guess they're not getting the military support the way they did in Israel, where the military was building shelters and all that. They're not getting that there?
Charles Krauthammer, who's a really great columnist for the Washington Post, summed it up pretty well last week. Let me think if I can recall. He said, the Israelis build missiles to defend their citizens, and Hamas uses their citizens to defend their missiles. And what he means by that is that Hamas really uses sort of these guerrilla tactics to protect their arsenal and their missile supplies. And that includes hiding their missiles in hospital wards and under mosques and under schools. And of course, in any sort of warfare, these are places where it's a no-go, where you never attack a hospital and you never attack a school. And Hamas is being accused by international groups and certainly the Israelis of hiding their weapons in these institutions. In fact, last week, the United Nations were outraged when they realized that a rocket battery was being stored in one of their schools. And that, of course, is a blatant disregard for United Nations space and property. But what this poses for Israel is a real dilemma. You know, if you have a rocket battery that will potentially endanger Israeli lives, you can take out that rocket battery in a densely populated area or a hospital or a beach. What do you do? What's the move? And it's a question that's very difficult for anyone. And if you're the Israelis, you have to take the shot because you have to defend your sovereignty. And I think that any country in the world, if they were being fired upon by an organization that Constitution calls for the destruction of your country, you would take the shot. and it's tragic, and it's really sad that these kids and these civilians are being killed. And I can't, of course, condone that because it's just awful. And I wish it didn't have to be like that. It's what can you say? It's heartbreaking. But it's war.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing as a clean war. War is by its nature dirty. We talk about the Geneva Convention and the rules of war. We talk about war crimes. War is a crime. All war is a crime. That's sort of what I think. Whether you have good intentions. Israelis don't want to kill civilians. I truly believe that. But it's a result of what happens.
Right. I have to say I have a few friends who have moved here from Israel, and they spent recently. And what I've found is when tragedies happen or when hardships happen to them, they are able to absorb it. Like they're used to that kind of, like you had mentioned, the inner strength and the resolve. And I've really seen it with my friends. Like there's this mindset that they have, like they've seen tragedy and they've experienced hardships and having to do without and keep going. And when it happens where somebody else might fall apart, I'm just generalizing here, where somebody else might fall apart or somebody else in the group falls apart, they have brought everybody together.
Yes, there's incredible strength. I know what you're talking about. And
yeah.
I would, as a Jewish person, say that is, in fact, a tenet of the Jewish condition.
Okay.
I come from a family where we lost many members, of course, in the concentration camps. My grandfather was in Auschwitz. And subsequently, when you go through something like that, you carry a very, very heavy burden.
Right.
And life means something, I think, a little bit differently. You don't take things for granted if you escaped death at the hands of a regime like the Nazis. And so is the case in Israel. During the Second Intifada in 2000, between 2000 and, let's say, 2005 or 6, there was a suicide attack, on a monthly basis in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, and Jerusalem. And collectively, it's really damaging to the psyche of Israel, to the people who live there. One of my cousins told me an anecdote where, he would go into a grocery store with his wife, and they would separate. She'd have one list, he'd have the other, and they make sure they never cross paths. Why? Because in case there was an attack in the grocery store, one of them would survive for the children. And when you hear an anecdote like that, the oppressive elements of the occupation of the West Bank, although they're unfortunate, and although I can't condone it, I understand it. I understand why the Israelis had to build a wall, because their people were scared, because suicide attacks were happening every week, and that's just what happens.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about, now in your documentary you can see what's happening, you can sort of sense it, but what were the smells that were there, and like with your other senses, what did you experience when you were there filming?
Well, what's unique about Sderot, in contrast to a city like Tel Aviv, when you go to Tel Aviv for the first time, it's this overwhelmingly cultured place. Everyone speaks English. It looks like any European, south of France, beautiful beaches, stunning women, and it's just a great, young, vibrant place. And when you go to a place like Sderot, it's very different because it's mostly immigrant communities, Jews from Arab countries that had to come to Israel after 1948 when the Jewish state was created. And so there's definitely a different ethos. The people many people don't speak English. And so subsequently, of course, that posed a problem for me because my Hebrew is limited. But it's a rural community. It's an industrial community and an agricultural community. There's a factory, a lot of farming. There are kibbutzes around, so it's not uncommon to have the wafts of manure or whatever from the kibbutzes come in. But something that really struck me as poignant is that Sderot is so close to the Gaza Strip and so close to Gaza City, in fact, the northern point of Gaza, that you can hear the call to prayers coming from the mosques from Sderot. That's how close it is. And what I thought was really beautiful is that the no man's land, it's about half a kilometer, it's a field between Israel, where they have a highly militarized presence, and the Gaza Strip, where they have this big fence that's very closely monitored, and of course there are drones flying over top. It's this field where these beautiful yellow flowers grow sporadically, and that's where the war is being waged right now, that field. And so that's something that I thought was especially poignant about Sderot.
Wow. I also want to ask, in your film it shows that they've built reinforced schools and reinforced buildings. So they showed a school, I believe, and it was like they had very little windows, or maybe there was windows on the inside and they had a wall or something around it. Can you describe that school and sort of what it was like for you being in that school?
Well, the Israeli government spares no expense at protecting the people. And the school, the Shar HaNegev High School, which I was fortunate enough to film at, really embodies that. The architect who built the school is a brilliant Israeli architect. His name is Yuval Jenny. And he has a really unique task amongst the international architectural communities, and that's because he has to build hospitals and schools and buildings that can withstand rockets, and that's a very unique task. So working with engineers from the Army, they designed this institution that can withstand rocket fire. So the idea is that if an alarm goes off and kids are in math class, or they're in English class or taking Hebrew class, they can just stay and resume their lesson as opposed to having to get up, run to a safe point, and that interrupt. And what I thought was really beautiful about the buildings is that, number one, when you look at them, you don't automatically think, oh, look, that's a concrete bunker. We have this image of a rocket shelter. Mm-hmm. You know, it's gray, bleak, concrete place that you don't want to spend too much time in. These buildings are beautiful. The architecture is very interesting. It's not a bland, plain building. Vibrant colors were used in their construction. There are several buildings on the campus. But what's most remarkable to me, and this is a sentiment that Yuval Jenny, the architect, who I interviewed in the film, shares, is that he wanted to make sure that when he designed the school, he had the foresight to one day realize there will be peace. Mm-hmm. And when there is peace, these schools have to just be schools, and they're not going to be rocket shelters anymore. And that's what he was thinking about when he was designing the school, which I thought was really amazing.
Now, they use small windows, they describe.
Yes, they do.
So do they, like, quote, make up for that with bright colors and with sort of architecture
yeah, I mean,
inside?
when you're in the school, it certainly doesn't seem like a bleak place.
No.
There's student artwork everywhere.
Right.
It's a really vibrant place. The students are like any high school kids you'd have in any high school in Toronto. They're listening to music. Kids are breakdancing in the halls or whatever, playing their guitars. And you don't really notice how small the windows are. What they do is that they angle the windows.
Okay.
So you don't get direct sunlight, but it's still bright. And, of course, they're heavily reinforced glass and everything like that, so very tough to penetrate. But the idea is if a rocket hits the school, everyone will be fine, which is really amazing. And, of course, there are shelters outside of the campus all around, and even those shelters are designed to have more rounded edges and more colors to make them more appealing on the campus itself.
Do you think that the parents get a little bit of a sense of ease to know that when they're at work and their children are at school, that their children are safe, that they don't have to worry about them?
Oh, of course. It's a real peace of mind. It's very difficult to live in a place like that. And a real easy criticism is, why don't these people move? I get that a lot. Why would anyone want to live there? Why don't these people move? But the ethos and the mentality seems to be amongst the people of Sderot and southern Israel, within range of the rockets, is that if we leave our homes, then the people who are terrorizing us are successful. Mm-hmm. So these people feel an obligation to stay. And fortunately for them, the Israeli government is so committed to protecting the sanctity of life that they are willing to spare no expense to build these shelters and these institutions so life can carry on as normal.
Mm-hmm. I just think if I was there and I was a parent of children in school, I would my stress level on a daily basis on that trip to and from school would be so high. And I just I give all of the strength to both sides for the commitment to their families, because it's the same in Gaza. They're probably saying, if I leave the rest of my family who cannot travel, and then what if we lose them? We're not there for them. And I could just, as a parent, I just can't imagine myself handling any of that.
Sure, but as I mentioned, we talked about this earlier, this is just the reality of being an Israeli. Mm-hmm. And it's not, it's the type of thing where if you're in that situation, you handle it. You find a way, because there's no alternative. And of course, this is a country where every 18-year-old has to go to the army and has to go fight. And this is not, unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's not a peacetime army.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like every generation has their own conflict.
Friends of my sons left Canada to go fight.
Sure, the Lone Soldier program, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good example. So Israelis, they're strong, they're resilient, and they understand what life is like. And that's just because they live in a country where their existence has been threatened periodically from their inception in 1948.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're going to go to a commercial now, and we'll resume our conversation with the independent film documentary maker, Daniel Roher. You are listening to realityradio101.com.
Jackie's Critters and Things is your reptile destination for unique reptiles and reptilian supplies. Come visit Jackie, affectionately called the Dragon Lady of Bowmanville, at her one-of-a-kind reptilian store. Learn about reptiles, their care, and find out more about the reptilian world. Browse the wide selection of animals, including lizards, snakes, and other reptiles. Find premium feeder supplies sure to satisfy your reptile's appetite, including crickets, silkworms, waxworms, superworms, and more. Check out our wide selection that will help you house and care for your reptile. Conveniently located at 116 King Street West in Bowmanville, Ontario. For more information, contact Jackie at 905-419-2006 or go to her website at jackiescritters.synthesite.com. Find Jackie on Facebook at facebook.com/JackiesCrittersThings. Do you have a pet with attitude? What is your pet thinking? Would you like to find out? Perhaps you're an animal feeling frustrated because the human folk in your life just don't get it. Take the next step to moving forward on the animal-human communication pipeline. Contact Deb Stanton, noted animal intuitive, for an informative consultation. Deb is passionate about animals, and she has over 20 years of experience in helping humans and animals communicate better. Consultations available online, in person, or by Skype. For more information, contact the animal communicator, Deb Stanton, by email at slobber@nexicom.net. That's slobber@nexicom.net. Are you tired of being on the weight loss roller coaster? Tired of constantly spending your hard-earned money on yet another weight loss gimmick? Fed up with gaining the weight back after the diet is over? Melody was, and she finally did something about it. Please listen to Melody's personal journey of permanent weight loss and health. Contact Melody at 1-844-512-4441. Go to her website at www.yourlastresolution.com or send her an email at yourlastresolution@yahoo.ca. Remember, that's 1-844-512-4441.
Is your family tired of the typical shopping weekend?
So is mine until we discovered the Curtis Flea Market. It has something for everyone. Over 100 vendors with new and used goods. Games for my brothers. Mom loves Sundays for the farmer's market. And Dad finds the coolest treasures.
The Curtis Flea Market, exit 425 off Highway 401 between Oshawa and Bowmanville.
You're listening to Beyond the Mundane with your hosts, Elsie Lynn Leyland and Randy St. Clair, right here on Reality Radio 101. And now, back to your hosts of Beyond the Mundane, Elsie Lynn Leyland and Randy St. Clair.
And welcome back to the show. We're talking to Daniel Roher from Loud Roar Productions. He's an independent filmmaker, and we've been discussing his documentary, Kids of the Rocket Siren, that's based in Sderot, Israel. And there's some pretty graphic images in this documentary of people that after the rockets have come and life in Israel for young people. And the times in Israel are not good. But we've been hearing about them for a while, and we hear about them everywhere. So what was your motivation to do a documentary on the rockets that are falling in Israel and how the young people especially are dealing with that? What's it to you?
Well, it's a great question, and I really appreciate you asking it. As you mentioned, there is a lot of media attention about this conflict. It's certainly oversaturated. It's really important, and it has been since the Cold War. It's sort of like an epicenter. Everyone is very interested, and there are a lot of international players who have something at stake between the Israeli and the Palestinian conflict. And we hear a lot of chatter about what's going on. There's been a lot of violence, of course, a lot of death and destruction as a result of this conflict. And what I was really committed to, and something that I am committed to, is peace. And it's a really important word, and it's a really important idea. And I am of the belief that if we take the time to trumpet an optimism and an understanding about what's happening in a place like Israel or the Gaza Strip or the West Bank, peace will be more attainable. I made a film about a little boy who grew up in this really dangerous environment where terrorists were firing missiles and rockets and anti-tank arsenals at his town. Yet he still holds a real vision for peace, and he expresses it in a really beautiful childlike way. At the end of the film, he says he's a really big fan of music. He says, why can't, someone like the Beatles, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, surely if they came to the border and they played their music, how could anybody fight? They'd be listening to it. He focuses on the universal elements that bring people together as opposed to the elements that divide people. And if we focus on those elements, and if we can learn to understand one another, and we can realize that peace is possible, and there are good Israelis, and there are good Palestinians who want peace, then it will be possible. We have to put emphasis on the positive and take away from the negative and the people who propagate the conflict. That's why I made the film.
What is it about you that drew you to this?
Well, of course, I'm Jewish, and Israel's always been a very important part of my life and my heritage. As I mentioned, I have family that was murdered in the concentration camps. My grandfather bears the scars of the concentration camp. He has a number on his forearm that the Nazis tattooed on him and millions of other Jewish people before they were sent to their deaths in the gas chambers. And Israel, to me, represents life. And the establishment of the State of Israel and the safe keeping of the State of Israel as the only democratic state in the Middle East really is the safe home for the Jewish people. And it's our ancestral homeland. And that's why I have such a connection to the place. That's on top of the fact that I have family there. And I've been fortunate enough to travel to the region on several occasions. And it's a stunning country. And it's a really fascinating culture. And, of course, it's in a very vibrant part of the world. So I care deeply for Israel. With that said, there is room for a Palestinian state. I am an advocate of the two-state solution. And subsequently, I think these parties need to come together through the turmoil, through the violence, through the destruction, and reach an agreement. There have been reconciliation efforts all around the world, conflicts that have been far bloodier and lasted far longer than the Israeli and the Palestinian conflict, and it's possible to reconcile, and I truly believe that. And that's what we need to focus on. And so that's why I made the film. And I want to show people that in the midst of the epicenter, the crosshairs of this conflict for the Israelis, there is still optimism and hope. And that was a really inspirational idea to me. And I felt as though as a filmmaker, if I could illustrate that to people, if I could show that to people, it would be a good thing for the world. And I think I've achieved that.
I think you are a reflection of your generation. I think Jews of your generation from all over the world, whether they've been in Israel yet or not, I think you're a reflection of the way they think, the way they feel. I really do believe that the younger generation has a better grasp on the idea of peace because it's been several generations now that have been dealing with this, and they haven't had much of a stopgap in time where they weren't dealing with this. In the past, there were longer periods of time where it wasn't so bad.
Sure.
And I think that what people are doing is the internet gives people a bigger voice, and the young people are not afraid to talk about humanism, and they're not afraid to talk about the political stampede of other countries influencing that area for their own gain.
I would say that you're right on a certain level. But what I would also say is, as a young Jewish person, there was a time in the 1960s, certainly 1967, of course in 1948, when Israel was the underdog. And there were Arab armies from every surrounding country who was attacking the country, this tiny little Jewish state, on all frontiers in an attempt to take it back and drive the Jews into the sea. And the Israelis were the heroes. But now the times have changed, and the Israelis aren't the heroes anymore. They're in charge. They're a superpower in the region. And so subsequently, the geopolitical elements that made it very easy to support Israel and to view them as courageous have changed. So what I invite are Jews, young Jews from around the world, to question the policies of Israel. I think it's okay to question the politics without being anti-Israel. I can still be a Zionist, and I can still be against the occupation. I can be a Zionist, and I can still have a hope for a Palestinian state. And that's what I do.
Now, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Well, I have a website, of course.
Right.
And on that website, there's a contact form, but my email address is daniel@loudroarproductions.com. And I'd be welcome to field any comments or questions. I know that this is a discussion that impassions a lot of people and emboldens a lot of people. So if anyone would like to send me a remark, I would be more than happy to.
What has been the response to the film thus far? Has it been mixed? Has it been overwhelmingly positive? Have you got some crank calls? Like what has been the response?
Well, I think it's been a very positive response. People who have seen the film have really enjoyed it and really responded well to this idea of peace that the film propagates. With that said, there has been criticism. The film doesn't cover the suffering of the people in Gaza, the children in Gaza, whose lives are far more miserable than the kids in Sderot. And that's an absolutely valid criticism. Unfortunately for me, it would have been impossible to go into the Gaza Strip. It would have been dangerous and it wouldn't have been possible. But that's the job for another filmmaker. I would love to see a film that's the mirror image of the one I made about the kids living in Gaza, because at the end of the day, they're children.
So like a young Jordanian filmmaker.
Sure, whatever it may be, or a young Palestinian filmmaker.
Yeah, to go in and do his take from his point of view and the family's points of view of Gaza.
But
I can see it.
For that film to curate with my film, I think it would be really important for that film to focus on the Palestinians in Gaza who want peace with Israel. And we hear a lot about this incitement, about how the Palestinian children are taught to hate the Israelis. And I've never seen that myself. It's only something that's been reported in the media. And I certainly hope it's not true. But there have certainly been reports of children under Hamas rule watching videos talking about the Zionist devils and how the Jews should be pushed into the sea. And I hope that's not the case. And I hold a really high capacity of hope.
Daniel, could I get you to pull that mic up to you a little bit more?
Sure. How's that?
That's better. Much better.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants to send any comments in, they can email us at realityradio101@yahoo.com, or they can call us in the GTA at 905-725-1907. In North America, 1-866-905-7325, and worldwide, 1-866-656-5477. If you'd like to join in and give us your comments, by all means, contact us while we're on the air, and maybe you can ask Daniel a question.
And I'm sure I can pull something out of the prize box cupboard for you.
That's right.
We've got a few interesting things. If you're international, we'll send you a book.
We have Speedos.
Yeah, we'll send you some Speedos, please.
We have some Speedos.
Yeah, for sure.
Very nice ones.
Yeah. I collected a few when I was down at the beach. I washed them, and so.
Did you?
Yeah.
So you were just stripping the men while you were down
I was.
there.
Yeah.
See, she didn't tell that
I would
story
I'd rather they were naked,
right,
or full trunk.
Yeah.
So I had to do my bit for womankind out here.
I can see you now.
Yes.
With the kitchen tongs and the scissor cutting the Speedos off because you don't want to touch them.
No, it's like, I'll give you $50 if you take that off, please. Yeah, I had some takers.
$50.
Yeah.
Man, I should have been down there with my string.
Well, I tried with 20. 20 didn't do it.
Let me. What's you need, up or down?
No, we got feedback.
Oh, I don't know what that is. Let me interject a little bit with Daniel. As you folks know, I'm half Jewish.
Oh, I think it's your mic.
Oh, yeah, it is, because I'm over here, and I'll turn that down for a minute, okay? And, this has been going on, as you say, from the inception of our Jewish state.
Sure.
The problem is, at one time, Israel has a right to defend itself.
Yep.
And it should always have that right. I am
like
very
any sovereign state.
That's right. My father was Jewish.
Sure.
I'm very pro-Israel. I've always have been. The problem is that we see a lot of times with procedure and things within Palestine and everything. The bottom line is it's very hard to negotiate and to talk, and you've heard this, with people that really don't want peace. They want to take that land and that back from
You're absolutely
Israel.
right.
And it's very hard to negotiate. That would be the utmost thing to do if we could do that. But you've heard all over the world where people say, well, how do you negotiate with terrorists?
You don't.
Right. And there has been, throughout the decades, there's been ceasefire upon ceasefire.
Sure.
The problem is Israel wants peace and always would do anything to achieve that. The great Ariel Sharon was a precursor to that. But he tried and tried, and even the government there now has tried. And what's happened is, instead of the people that want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, as we've heard Iran state and things of that nature,
sure.
Israel's forced to have its Iron Dome, and it's built up its military, and with the help of the United States as well,
of course,
because that is a sincere ally of the United States, although I think this president that the United States has now...
That's another issue.
...is another issue, and he's very weak.
He's just fine.
No, he's not.
He's just fine
he's
the way he is.
He's very weak on Israel, and he should be ashamed of that because, I think that his foreign policy is very weak when it comes to Israel. They have not really tried to help that country in a long time.
I'm sure he's tuning in and appreciates your comments.
Well,
I think he's just fine the way he is.
I don't.
And there's many layers that he has to go through, so we can agree to disagree.
He's the most powerful man in the world, and he's not doing enough for Israel.
So we can agree to disagree.
We can.
All right, good.
Like, it was okay to drop bombs from drones in Africa, but it wasn't okay to help
He should be
Israel.
dropping bombs where the terrorists are. You see, that's the problem. When you're liberal, you think war is bad. War is very bad. But when you have a nation like Israel who doesn't want war, who doesn't start war, and everybody's pounding the crap out of them, you can't fight wars with words sometimes when people aren't willing to sit down and listen.
Now, Gary, you're absolutely right, but I'm just going to interject for one moment. I understand what you're saying, and of course I've studied every crevice of this conflict, and I appreciate your points. And as a proud Zionist myself, I agree with many of them. However, where we differ is I feel as though the occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip for the last 40 or 50 years, since 1967, has made it very difficult for the Palestinian people to trust Israel. And when we say that the Palestinians or the Arabs only want war and only want the destruction of Israel, that is not true. That's a half-truth. Right now, there are two governments in Palestine. We have the Gaza Strip, which of course is the Mediterranean enclave in the south, and then there's the West Bank, named for the West Bank of the Jordan River. And these are two separate territories. They are not geographically connected. That's important to remember. And the most unfortunate feature right now is that there is a government in Gaza called Hamas, and this is a terrorist organization. And there's another government in the West Bank called the Palestinian Authority, and that is another government. And they amongst themselves don't get along. It enraged Israel a couple months ago when these two governments signed a unity agreement. But of course, it looks like that's going to fall through. But the point I'm getting at is the Palestinian Authority, in my mind, is the truest negotiation partner that the Israelis have ever had. This is a group that has accepted Israel's existence.
What about all the land, though, that Ariel Sharon gave back to them, and it wasn't enough?
You're absolutely. There's nothing.
It wasn't enough.
You're absolutely. There's nothing I can be said. In 2005, Ariel Sharon, in an attempt to broker peace, because in Israel, the mindset had always been, if you give land, there will be peace.
Right.
As was evidenced in 1979, when the Sinai Peninsula was given back to Egypt, and of course, there's been peace with Egypt ever since. But in 2005, there was a unilateral disengagement from the Gaza Strip, and Israeli troops were sent into Gaza to remove Jewish settlers from their homes by force Jews removing Jews, and bring them back into Israel. And this presented a great opportunity for the Palestinians. The land was theirs. There was no one standing in their way. And what happened? They had a closely monitored election in 2007. The international community had their eyes on the events that unfolded. And instead of electing the Palestinian Authority, they decided to elect Hamas, which is a terrorist organization in the eyes of the European Union, the United States, and of course Israel. And since then, instead of building their infrastructure and becoming a modern, robust country, or laying the foundation for one, they became a terrorist state. And of course now Gaza's on lockdown because Israel can't have rockets being fired at their population. Mm-hmm. And what I'll say, Gary, on that note, is that in order for peace to be achieved, we have to focus on the partners that we have at the table.
But they're not, and they won't.
But the Palestinian Authority is a partner that the Israelis have and will continue to negotiate with. And I feel like now more than ever, Hamas's standing in the international community is diminished. The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt was ousted last year, and that was their closest ally. So subsequently, with the war being fought in Syria, Bashar al-Assad can no longer support Hamas financially. Iran, because of their nuclear sanctions, have taken their foot off the pedal. So Hamas is on the ropes, and the Israelis know this, and the Palestinian authorities know this. So coming out of this conflict, what I hope happens is that Hamas crumbles, and the vacancy of them vacating is filled by the Palestinian Authority. And I really do hope the Palestinians can work out their disagreements amongst themselves and they become unified, because then, of course, it'd be far easier to negotiate peace. How do you negotiate, as Gary mentioned, with a group that calls for your destruction? You simply can't.
Right. And if the Hamas is in the government, that means everybody in Palestine at this time
in the Gaza Strip
is fearing for their lives of crossing the Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly have been reports. You don't want to speak against Hamas, I would think. This is an Islamic extremist group that condemned the assassination of Osama bin Laden, to put it in perspective. So yeah, you wouldn't want to cross them, I would suppose. But in any event, it's going to be interesting in the coming weeks, once a ceasefire is declared, to see what happens in the Gaza Strip. Because once again, we are at a crossroads, and this presents a unique opportunity. You know, I often think about the fact that the Palestinians have never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity, and that seems to be true, as evidenced in 2000 when Ehud Barak, the Israeli prime minister at the time, offered to give 92%, I think the figure is, of the West Bank to disengage, give that land back to the Palestinians under Yasser Arafat at the time, with the proposal to build up the state, and of course they would get more land. And he rejected that proposal. He went back to his people, hero. The second Intifada was launched, and here we are 14 years later, and we are no closer to peace then than we were
now than then.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to make an appeal right now.
Sure.
We are international, and even if our station numbers can't be accessed by certain people in certain countries, what can happen is our archives can.
Sure.
Our archives at www.beyondthemundaneradio.com can be accessed by anybody. So if for some reason our satellite feed can't be accessed by someone in Gaza or Palestine, but our website can, please pass this on to them. Make sure that they know the link. And within a week, I will have this up in the archives. And what I want is to appeal to a young filmmaker, a young documentary filmmaker in Gaza who is willing to take a chance on his people and tell their story to balance.
And I'd like to add
what you have done.
If we do find that filmmaker, I will help him make his film with any logistical or support or equipment that I can provide, because I would love to see that film be made.
Awesome.
And if you have difficulty getting the stuff there, I have a connection. So I think I can get the stuff to them if you can't.
Sure.
So I'm making this appeal. I really, really want someone to take a risk on their people for peace, just like Daniel did. And I think that you guys can make a mark. I really think you can.
Daniel, did you to start this film? Did you do a quick start program, or what?
Nope,
did someone finance it, or
I self-financed it? I independently I showed up in the community one day.
Mm-hmm.
I found a place to stay in Sturroat, and it was really difficult on the get-go because people were very apprehensive to talk to me. A lot of people didn't speak English.
Well, it's your accent, you know.
I encountered a lot of opposition, to say the least, but I totally self-financed the entire production. I was very passionate about making it.
Very expensive or not?
I'm good at keeping costs down. I am a one-man crew, and because of modern technology and filmmaking equipment, if you're good and you know how to utilize equipment, you don't need expensive gear. And I like to think my films embody that because I use really basic stuff, but I really know their limits and I know how to push them. And I think the film's the visual aesthetic.
Where is that available now?
If
film? Somebody wanted to watch that or purchase it or whatever it is, where?
The film's now available online. I felt in lieu of recent events, it would be a great time to release the film to the masses. And you can go to our website, www.loudroarproductions.com, and you can hit the link that says the link that says films. And the film's called Kids of the Rocket Siren. If you click on the film, it'll take you to a separate page, and you can click a link that says view film and watch it straight from there.
Awesome.
Very good.
And I have those 2 links up on our Facebook page for Beyond the Mundane Radio. So if you're not a friend of our Facebook page, go over there at some point tonight and like it, and then look for the links, and you can click directly into them. Loud Roar Productions is up there, and so is the video link.
All right, so we have to go to a commercial and a song, and we'll be back with Daniel Roher to talk more about your other projects when we come back. And you're listening to Beyond the Mundane on realityradio101.com.
Are you in the GTA and looking for something fun, exciting, educational, and historical? Try the Muddy York Walking Tours, a series of themed walking tours through some of Toronto's most historically significant sites. Learn about the specters that roam the many old streets of Toronto on the Haunted Streets of Downtown Toronto tour, or learn about Toronto's dark, disturbing past in the Bloody York Crime and Punishment tour, or enjoy a walk on the sweeter side when you explore the many amazing chocolate shops and eateries on the Chocolate Tour of Toronto. Muddy York Walking Tours has more than a dozen unique tours to fit your interests. Many of the tours are only $15 per person, with special rates available for students and groups. Check out Muddy York Walking Tours online at www.muddyyorktours.com, or give us a call and book your tour at 416-487-9017. Join the Muddy York Tour Group on Facebook for special events and exclusive behind-the-scenes invitations. Muddy York Walking Tours. Join us in exploring the city of Toronto.
Mandy's Toys and Things is a wonderful place to find great toys, awesome jewelry, and unique porcelain figures. There is a wide selection of items for the entire family. Come in and see our plush toys and action figures section for great buys, fantastic volume deals, and cheap prices. We are conveniently located at the Curtis Flea Market, 1696 Bloor Street in Curtis, Ontario. Building 2 at the back of the building. Open Saturdays and Sundays all year round. Mention this ad and receive 5% off. Only at Mandy's Toys and Things.
This half of the show is brought to you by Motivated Motion, located at the Curtis Flea Market. Motivated Motion carries Lynn Tucker's handmade silver and copper wire wrap jewelry, as well as her unique felt creations. They also carry a wide range of charms, jewelry, ritual altar supplies, crystals, gems, Himalayan salt lamps, incense, books, gifts, and much, much more. They've got the best prices in town. Mention Beyond the Mundane Radio and we pay the HST. Come on down to the Curtis Flea Market, booth 108, located at 1696 Bloor Street in Curtis, Ontario, every Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. Check us out and shop online at motivatedmotion.com and follow us on Facebook for access to special offers. Just go to facebook.com/motivated.motion.gallery. Spooky, supernatural, or spiritual, Motivated Motion has it all.
You're listening to Beyond the Mundane with your hosts Elsie Lynn Leyland and Randy St. Clair right here on Reality Radio 101. And now back to your hosts of Beyond the Mundane, Elsie Lynn Leyland and Randy St. Clair.
Welcome back to the show. We have a young independent filmmaker, Daniel Roher from Loud Roar Productions, in the studio. And we've been talking to him about his documentary, Kids of the Rocket Siren. But Daniel, I have to ask you about another movie that you made, and Resolute.
Yes.
It is just an amazing production, I must say. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah. So I made the film in Israel, and I came back to Toronto, and I finished it up. And, of course, I immediately got to work on finding my next story. And I wanted to tell a Canadian story. That was one thing that was really important to me. And, you know, Canada really has this amazing legacy of producing documentary films. We're the first country of documentary films. That's something I'm very proud of. And we have a long legacy of making films about our north. This is our rugged wilderness. It's in our backyard. It belongs to us. It's our collective heritage, and it's something that I really wanted to explore. So I had this idea that I'd make a film about an RCMP detachment. And I wanted to do an Arctic RCMP detachment. What's it like for these guys who are so isolated in the middle of nowhere, and there's just two of them. They just have each other. And so I contacted the RCMP, and of course there were back and forth negotiations. We decided that Resolute Bay, Nunavut, which is the second northernmost community in the world, would be a good place to begin. And they gave me their permissions, and we had the contracts all drawn up. And the day I was supposed to leave for Resolute, I had all my food with me, because you can't get any food up there, and all the plane tickets booked. I got an email from the RCMP, and that, of course, is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And they told me, unfortunately, we won't be able to participate in this production. And so here I was the night before I was to depart. And, you know, there's this old adage that when a door closes, a window opens. So I figured, well, it's too late to back down now. We're going to go there and figure out what happens. So it was a wonderful journey to Resolute. We passed through beautiful communities like Cape Dorset and Pond Inlet, stunning glaciers and natural landscapes that were just simply breathtaking. The images people think of when they think of the Canadian Arctic. And so I land in Little Resolute, and I was anticipating a similar beauty. But what I instead received was a desolate, bleak, blank, dead desert. Nothing grows in Resolute. There are no glaciers. It's shale. It's rock. It's where NASA goes to test their rovers for Mars, to put it in perspective. And I was shocked. And then I got to the community, and I was staying with a young man and his wife and his child. And it was an impoverished house. And it was certainly poverty from where I came from. And it was very difficult. It was certainly challenging, and I sort of thought, what did I get myself into? And then I encountered a lot of hostility in the community. As a white person, there was a lot of adversity towards me. I get kicked out of homes. People would be willing to even meet with me, despite my intentions just to get to know this fascinating culture and this beautiful people. And I didn't really know what my film would be about. And that's until I heard the story of Zipporah Kaluk. And Zipporah was one of the relocatees of the High Arctic relocation. And this was an initiative of the Canadian government in the 1950s to assert sovereignty up north. Of course, this is the midst of the Cold War, and international law stipulates that in order to have sovereignty over a body of land, you need to have people living there. And there was no one living in the deep Arctic. So the Canadian government had this idea to dupe Inuit families from Inukjuak in northern Quebec and Pond Inlet to move to these locations, promising them modern housing, electricity, everything they could ever need. When these people arrived, they had nothing. It was all lies. Their dogs were taken away, so they couldn't leave. And to make matters far worse for Resolute, the men from the Inuit community were told by the white men from the military base that they should come to the base. There's a tavern. They'll have a great time. They should come have a drink. They should bring their wives and their girlfriends. And an epidemic of alcoholism soon swept through the community. And so it was very difficult growing up in this environment for the young people, because it's a community where it's 6 months of the year they're in darkness, and their elders are inebriated. Most of the town was constantly inebriated. So it was a very dangerous, very frightening place to grow up. So that's sort of what my film's about. The story of the high Arctic relocation, the intergenerational trauma that was a result of it, and how the community is slowly sort of getting its feet back on the ground and making great strides towards the road of recovery.
And like I've mentioned to you before, being of Jewish heritage and your grandfather being an encamper would mean that you understand from your family's perspective being displaced. And I would say that the passion that you probably and the hurt you felt couldn't be felt by the average person as much as someone that had already had history of being displaced.
Well, it's interesting. It's something I didn't even think of, really, until I was filming with Sephora one afternoon in her tiny little, very cozy home, and she pulled out an old relic from her past, from the relocation, and what it was an Eskimo identification number, because, of course, the Canadian government referred to the Inuit as Eskimos. And it was simply a number, and that's how they identified the Inuit. And I explained to Zipporah that my grandfather was in a concentration camp. He was in Auschwitz, and he had a number 2. And his number didn't come on a little tag that he was to wear around his neck. It was tattooed on his arm. And, of course, she had heard of that, the Holocaust and what had happened, and she really felt akin to that, because she realized that I was displaced, and never before had I equated the persecution of my people to the persecution of her people. But here we were in this middle of this cottage on this tiny island in the middle of the Northwest Passage. We couldn't be more different from one another. She's a 70-year-old, Inuit woman who's strong and independent, and I am a young man from Toronto, from the city, who's sort of delving into adulthood. Yet we were sitting in this little cottage, and we felt very close to one another because of our mutual histories. And, of course, I was very fortunate in my life that I never had to directly be afflicted by what my grandfather went to. But still, the history resonated very strongly with Zipporah. And she really appreciated that.
Now, I have to say, I have been to Nunavut, and I've been to Iqaluit, and I've been to Pangnirtung.
Sure.
And both of them have resources. But I can say to you, from hearing the people in your movie, in your film, speaking the native language.
Sure.
When I was there, I would hear that everywhere, and it has a wonderful, and it just sounds so wonderful to the ear.
Yes, it does.
So when you had people speaking their native language,
yes,
it has such a richness to it that it brought so much more to the film.
It's always very important to me when I interview subjects who don't speak English that they speak their native language, and that is simply because I don't remember who said this, but I think it was Einstein who famously said that when someone speaks in their mother language or in their second language, they're speaking with their brain. But when someone speaks in their mother tongue, they're speaking with their heart. And, of course, when you're interviewing a subject, that's where you want their words to come from. And the cadence and rhythm of the Inuit language was just so beautiful that it would have been a really sorry... I would have been really sorry if I had missed that opportunity and had Zipporah speak English.
Right.
So I definitely wanted anyone who could speak Inuktitut to speak that language.
And I have to say, from my travels in Nunavut also, you can feel the pain of the people. You can see it, feel it. It's etched in their faces, and they resolve to have a better life. But there is a lot of baggage there.
Yeah.
And I felt that you really captured that very well in the film.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I don't feel comfortable speaking on behalf of the Inuit people because... their experience are so vast and numerous that I couldn't even begin to imagine what they've gone through. But I've spent enough time with Zipporah and her family that, I can say, it was a very difficult experience. And certainly Zipporah especially takes a lot of comfort in her faith. She spends a lot of time in church and with God. And that's something she holds very dear because there's a lot of sort of baggage and wounds in her past. And, of course, they've been making great strides to overcome that. And she's a very strong woman. She's independent, totally independent. She still hunts. She's still out on the land. She taught me how to butcher a seal, which was a fascinating experience. And I was very fortunate for that. And
did you eat any?
Of course, yeah.
Did you have any flipper?
Oh, yeah. Country food.
What did it taste like to you?
Seal?
Yeah.
Oh, well, what's unique about seal is that seals are mammals.
Yeah.
So it has a texture of meat.
It does.
But their diet is only fish.
Yes.
So it tastes like a fish.
Yes.
So that was very interesting. But there's something in seal. I don't know what it is. But when I had the soup and the broth and I ate the seal meat, which is delicious, something in my head just turned funny. And I got some sort of high came over me. And I just felt sleepy and just so calm because of that seal meat. But the country food totally subsidizes the diet.
Yeah.
Very, very good for you. Packed with essential vitamins and minerals. And so I was fortunate enough to try all the culinary delicacies of the Inuit people.
Even the fermented food?
The fermented food?
Yeah, the fermented fish and...
Oh, like the dried fish. No, it wasn't the season, unfortunately.
But did you try it raw?
Oh, well, of course. That's how it's prepared. So muktuk, which is beluga or narwhal, is really delicious. I enjoyed that, and I was very proud that by the end of my my stay in Resolute, I was able to cut up using an ulu, which is traditional woman's knife, to cut myself a piece of muktuk and enjoy it. And I'm pretty sure I still have some in my freezer. Muktuk was fabulous. Caribou is a great meat. Of course, seal was great. Ptarmigan, really nice.
Yeah. When I was in Iqaluit, I went for a walk, and the people there showed me the housing that was provided by the government years ago.
Yeah.
And it was just a tiny little shack. And this was provided to a husband and wife and all their children. And it really was even smaller than this studio.
Yeah.
It was amazing that they were expected, they were told they would get this great house, and then what they were actually provided with.
The Canadian government made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
Certainly. And that's evidenced in Resolute Bay.
So you see these kind of relics sort of still there.
Certainly.
It's amazing to see them, right?
Yeah, of course. And I had the opportunity to travel to Grise Fjord, which is the northernmost community in the country, right at the top of the Arctic, very far north. And it's a beautiful community. Unlike Resolute, it happens to be of great natural beauty. And there are buildings that were original, that were the RCMP detachment, where a lot of abuse took place.
Yeah.
And it's ghostly. It's very haunting to look at these structures today.
Why did you make this film?
Well, as mentioned, I really liked the romanticism and the idea of the Arctic. And I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to go experience the Arctic, which is a place I feel very close to as a part of my heritage as a Canadian. And I didn't know what I was in for. It was sort of just the adventure and the romanticism of it. And I arrived in Resolute Bay with an open heart and an open mind, wanting to make a film. And this is the story I found. So that's what set me off on the journey. I had no idea what the film would be that I ended up making. And I was very fortunate that I found a lot of really beautiful, wonderful people who were willing to let me into their lives and give me the opportunity to tell their story.
I have to say it's a very compelling film.
Sure.
And the graphic images that you provide, you don't sort of sugarcoat it for sure.
No, it was tough. It was tough for these people, yeah.
And the human experience that is captured on that film is amazing.
Well, thank you very much. That's probably the best compliment you could give to someone like me.
Yeah.
So thank you.
What's the time frame that we're looking at for this to have a public release?
I'd say about a year. Right now, Resolute is still making the rounds in the festival circuit. It's going to be playing in Calgary in the coming months. It's going to be playing in Utah and hopefully many other festivals.
I have one complaint about Resolute.
Sure.
It's not long enough.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a real compliment. Thank you.
For sure.
Have you had any experience with your films being in TIFF?
No. TIFF very rarely takes short documentaries. And my films have always been short up until this point.
Resolute is about 17 minutes, is
22
it?
minutes.
22,
yeah, so
and the Kids of the Rocket Siren?
17 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So pretty short.
So when you make a short film, the rule of thumb is always brevity.
Right.
And I lost sight of that when I made Resolute, but I didn't want to compromise on this story, and I feel like that 17 minutes wouldn't be enough. So subsequently, it's possible that, it's difficult to program a 22-minute film, and that could have negatively impacted where it's gotten in terms of festivals and where it hasn't.
Yeah, I noticed in both the films the clothing is provided by a certain...
Higher Ground Limited, yeah.
So what is Higher Ground?
Higher Ground Limited is a fabulous clothing store in Toronto. It's located on Yonge Street, 2541 Yonge Street. And it's outdoor casual wear, so Patagonia, North Face, Canada goose, Arcteryx, lines like that. It's the go-to destination. If you're traveling, if you want to go anywhere abroad, you go to Higher Ground and they'll hook you up. And they've been great patrons of mine, and they've really made sure that I had a warm jacket in Nunavut or a moisture-working T-shirt in Israel.
Great. When we come back from the commercial, I'd like to talk to you about the film that you've just finished working on.
Sure.
Because I want people to be really interested, to be watching out for when they can release, because
Sure.
everybody's got to see all these.
Sure.
So you've been listening to realityradio101.com. Stay tuned for the last part of our show.
And I'd give up forever to touch you, 'cause I know that you feel me somehow.
Jackie's Critters and Things is your reptile destination for unique reptiles and reptilian supplies. Come visit Jackie, affectionately called the Dragon Lady of Bowmanville, at her one-of-a-kind reptilian store. Learn about reptiles, their care, and find out more about the reptilian world. Browse the wide selection of animals, including lizards, snakes, and other reptiles. Find premium feeder supplies sure to satisfy your reptile's appetite, including crickets, silkworms, waxworms, superworms, and more. Check out our wide selection that will help you house and care for your reptile. Conveniently located at 116 King Street West in Bowmanville, Ontario. For more information, contact Jackie at 905-419-2006 or go to her website at jackiescritters.synthesite.com. Find Jackie on Facebook at facebook.com/JackiesCrittersThings. Do you have a pet with attitude? What is your pet thinking? Would you like to find out? Perhaps you're an animal feeling frustrated because the human folk in your life just don't get it. Take the next step to moving forward on the animal-human communication pipeline. Contact Deb Stanton, noted animal intuitive, for an informative consultation. Deb is passionate about animals, and she has over 20 years of experience in helping humans and animals communicate better. Consultations available online, in person, or by Skype. For more information, contact the animal communicator, Deb Stanton, by email at slobber@nexicom.net. That's slobber@nexicom.net. Are you tired of being on the weight loss roller coaster? Tired of constantly spending your hard-earned money on yet another weight loss gimmick? Fed up with gaining the weight back after the diet is over? Melody was, and she finally did something about it. Please listen to Melody's personal journey of permanent weight loss and health. Contact Melody at 1-844-512-4441. Go to her website at www.yourlastresolution.com or send her an email at yourlastresolution@yahoo.ca. Remember, that's 1-844-512-4441.
Is your family tired of the typical shopping weekend?
So is mine until we discovered the Curtis Flea Market. It has something for everyone. Over 100 vendors with new and used goods. Games for my brothers. Mom loves Sundays for the farmer's market. And Dad finds the coolest treasures.
The Curtis Flea Market, exit 425 off Highway 401 between Oshawa and Bowmanville.
And now, just returning from the beach, photographing Speedos, Elsie Lynn Leyland and Randi St. Clair.
Welcome back to Beyond the Mundane. We're going to be wrapping up the show now. We're still talking to Daniel Roher. I wanted to talk to you about the film that you've just come back from shooting.
Sure.
So where were you this time?
Well, when I finished Resolute, it was a really sort of melancholy, sad piece. I wanted to find a happy story. So naturally, I went to the East Africa, which is not known to be a happy place, but in fact it is a very happy place, and there are a lot of happy, wonderful things happening there. And I spent 2 weeks in Kigali in Rwanda. And when I was there, I learned a lot about the country, and of course I learned a lot about the genocide that took place in 1994. But I couldn't really find a story that I could sink my teeth into, something that really lent itself to what I was doing. So after 2 weeks in Kigali, I hopped on a bus, 12 hours overland from Kigali to Kampala, And it was on that bus where I found a newspaper, and as I was flipping through it, I found this story about Bashir Ramathan, who was a boxer from Naguru, which is a slum suburb of Kampala. And it's important to mention about Uganda, they love boxing. It's like hockey in Canada or baseball in the United States. It's their sport. So I was reading this article, and Bashir's a fabulous fighter. I was talking about his really dedicated training routines and all that. And the spark really went off when I realized he's blind. Bashir doesn't have any light sensitivity. He can't see anything. And I thought, wow, that's really unique. I'd never really heard a story like that. Someone overcoming their disability in such a unique way. So I got into Kampala on Friday night, and I woke up the next morning at 6:30, and I picked up a boda boda, which is a moto taxi, and he took me to the slum, and I got off, and I asked the kid to take me to the boxing club, and I found him. And then eventually I found Bashir and his coach Hassan, and I told them what I was doing, and they were very interested in the project and very willing to work with me and to tell Bashir's story. So the film's called Bashir's Vision, and it's about this amazing fighter and this really inspiring advocate for the rights of disabled people in Uganda and beyond.
Now, you and I had this conversation about the film. You said that you have a bit of a dream for what this film could do for Bashir. Yeah,
I mean, I really felt an obligation after Bashir, who lives in a mud hut in a slum in Kampala. He has very little, and he let me into his life, and he's the type of guy who, even though he doesn't have very much, he'd still feed me, he'd still give me a meal when I came to his home, and he'd still share with me what he has, and that was really inspiring. I learned a lot about happiness, because here's a guy who's totally blind, he has very little, but he's a happy, fun, silly, nice, great guy. And that was amazing for me. That was really inspiring. And so I certainly feel an obligation to do whatever I can to help him. So when the film's finished, eventually I'm going to release some sort of online funding thing, just to raise a few $100s or $1,000. A little sum by our means, but some money that will go a long way in Uganda for a man like Bashir.
When you get that prepped and you're ready, will you come back and we'll bounce that off our international
certainly, of
listeners?
Course. Yes, I'd love to.
Because I think they really respond to that kind of stuff.
Sure.
We have great listeners, by the way. Thank you, guys.
So describe Bashir to us. How would we know when we met him?
How would you know?
Is he larger than life, or
no?
Or
I mean, he's a big guy. I was really
Is he hairy?
impressed. He's not hairy. He's bald.
Okay.
But he's a really big, good-looking African guy.
Yeah.
And even though he's blind, he has a really strong sense of what's going on around him.
So this is a boxer.
Yeah.
That's blind.
Yes, totally blind.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it begs the question: how does he land his punches?
You'll have to watch the film, as
All
Bashir
right.
Bashir says. When he steps into the ring, he tries his best to see with his ears.
Okay.
And that's a really amazing sentiment.
Yeah.
So if there's something that you want to do in your life, you can come up with 1,000,001 excuses as to why you can't do it.
Yeah.
Or you can step into the ring and see with your ears.
That's a good phrase.
So where is he doing all this fighting?
So his uncle, Bashir's uncle, his name is Coach Hassan, and Hassan runs the East Coast Boxing Club in Naguru. And it's a very tight-knit community. They're Nubian, that's their tribe, which comes from the Sudanese-Egyptian border. Very close-knit religious Muslim community. And they take care of one another. And they have very little. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of the fighters there, the young men, they have nothing. And they don't have the same opportunities as someone who comes from a country like this. And these boys look for sponsors. They're great fighters, very talented. They look for someone who will take them under their wing, who can bring them to a country like Canada or Europe or the United States, and give them what they need to be champions and escape poverty. That's the dream.
Do you what's an average income there compared to us?
Well, it's tough to say. But what I can tell you to maybe put the economy in perspective is that I spent about 2 weeks in Kampala. 2.5 weeks in Kampala. I was staying at a fairly nice hotel. Food and everything was probably $300
for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's about $12 a night to stay in the hotel. and then the food is about 9,000 shillings, which maybe is $4, and you get a nice fish, rice, really great, awesome food in Uganda. So it was a great experience.
Now, how you've mentioned that boxing is big there.
Yeah.
So how big is it? Like, is it on the newspapers, or people doing it in the streets? Like, what's
it's
about?
very popular. I mean, sports. It's just a very active. It's a very young country, and of course, boxing is a poor man's game. You don't need much to box, and so they've really embraced it. And there have been a number of Ugandan fighters. Don't ask me their names because I don't remember, who have made it on the international circuit and have been real heroes for their countries, and who have won silver and bronze medals at the Olympics and other international competitions. So they love it. It's a really big game, and I was fortunate enough to attend the qualifiers for the Commonwealth. And one of the boys who appears in the film, his name is Mohammed Kazim. Now tell me that's not a fighter's name. And he made it onto the Commonwealth team, which was really exciting. Unfortunately, the Commonwealth Games, which are happening right now in Glasgow, he is not there, and neither are his teammates because they couldn't afford the flights to get there. And that just sort of illustrates how difficult it is and how little support they have.
Okay, so here's my other plea. For all you international people who love boxing and you want to support somebody, maybe you should be looking there. And maybe you could sponsor for very little money
if anybody
a
wants,
teammate
if
to
anybody
come.
wants to contact or help or support anyone in Naguru in the East Coast Boxing Club, I will personally be a liaison and make sure that the finances, any donation, whether it's $50 or $85, gets to the right place. Because $85 goes a long way. $50 goes a long way.
Yeah.
A long way.
Now, Daniel, what do you to get to all these places and everything? Are you do you work full time? Are you how do you finance all this stuff? Are you independently wealthy, or what? What's the deal? You're doing a lot of traveling and stuff.
I'm not independently wealthy, but you're absolutely right. I've been very fortunate to be able to travel. And I have worked. Yeah, I started my own business, the production company, and I've done work for clients, for musicians, for any corporate, anyone who wants work. You know, it's very common for any young filmmaker to take on these sort of jobs to pay the bills. And that's how I certainly financed the one I did in Israel, and I delved into my life savings to go make that.
Yeah.
And then when I went up to Nunavut, I was fortunate enough to receive a grant from the government of Canada to make that film, and it was a really generous grant. And so I was really able to put the resources and time into it, where I could just focus on that for 4 months, and I made enough money making that film that I could put a little away for a rainy day, and travel to Africa and make my film in Uganda.
Do you have any formal training as far as school, like videography, anything?
Well, I went to the Etobicoke School of the Arts, which is a really wonderful institution, just outside of Toronto in Etobicoke. But really, I took a film class, and that's sort of the first time I'd made a film, and that was obviously very illuminating experience because it sort of set me on the path. But not really. I didn't go to film school, certainly. I kind of just self-taught, I would say.
I have a funny feeling the world would have missed you if you went to film school.
That's possible.
You'd be just getting out now.
Yeah, I think so.
Can you touch a little bit on the grant process in Canada?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, people are always going to say how tough it is, and it's true that it is tough. And the reality is there's never been more people vying for them, and there's never been less grant money. They're drying up, and it's certainly not a viable model to base a career on getting government grants. And quite frankly, I don't think it's the responsibility of the government to pay me to make my films. I think that if there's a demand for them, the money will come from somewhere else. With that said, it just so happened that the film I did up north would have made a great educational tool for the government in Nunavut, so they certainly saw the value in it. But grant writing, can be a very tedious process. It can be a very long process. And my ethos has always been just shut up and make the films. You can spend a lot of time thinking about it and trying to find the money and doing this or doing that. Or you could haul ass for a summer working as a busboy and make a couple $1,000 and go do your film. And I've always thought that to be more productive. With that said, I come from a family that totally supports what I do. When I'm back in Toronto, I don't have my own place. I live at home, and I live very modestly. And that's been really what has supported me. But when I make my films, they're my films, and I pay for them generally. So it's always very important that, the money comes from somewhere.
And even getting the grant, you did the legwork.
Oh yeah, you have to write synopsises and all these letters and get all these recommendations, and then once you submit the grant, it takes about 3 or 4 months for them to get back to you, and you don't receive your first check until maybe 5 months after you submit the application. So it's a long and tedious process, but it's what you have to do if you want to make a living doing this, and that's obviously my ambition.
Mm-hmm.
So you write your own scripts for it, and you videotape yourself, and you do everything. You mentioned your one-man band, so to speak.
Generally, you have to work within your means.
Right.
And those are my means.
Do you have to do storyboards for documentaries?
Well, no, and you mentioned, Randi, a script. I don't write scripts either. I just go shoot them, and I keep track of what I've photographed, and I put the edits together in my head while I'm on location. So when I get back, I really like to know where everything's going, and it doesn't, of course, always work out that way. But in terms of storyboards, I don't do storyboards. I do my own animations, but beyond that, no.
If you were speaking to another young person in Toronto about filmmaking, and you've done this sort of the hard way, do you have one piece of advice?
Just work as hard as you can. Haul ass.
Haul ass.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
and hopefully have rich parents.
Yeah, that always helps.
Because it does help, right?
No, certainly. But I mean, for me, I come from a very comfortable life, but it's been very important to me to do it on my own, and that's obviously that's what my parents instilled into me. I couldn't do this if my parents were writing me checks to go do these films. I'd feel like shit. I wouldn't want to do it like that, and I've been fortunate that I've had some success making my films my way.
Well, It's been absolutely wonderful listening to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you really understand your material.
Thank you.
You've really opened my eyes to things, and it makes me proud when I see young Canadians jumping at opportunity and grasping that brass ring, even if it's a little tarnished on the drag up. And it's important because this society of instant gratification is not going to get anybody anywhere.
No, it's not. And one thing I will say to our Canadian listeners is that, documentary funding is always disappearing. And I do believe people want this content, and it could be something that we have to fight for, that we have to be vocal about. The CBC just announced massive cuts against the will of all of their senior staff, all their reporters, cuts to documentary programming. And I think that's a real shame, because Canada is known around the world for the wonderful content we produce. And it's something that we should cherish as our collective heritage.
And then the world is proud of us for what we do in filmmaking and acting.
Yeah.
And, they're really proud of us. And we know that. We can tell when, the way we're acknowledged around the world. And even as a Canadian just traveling the world, we get treated better than anybody else.
Yeah. It's always nice to have a Canadian passport.
Right.
And have that little Canadian flag on your knapsack.
Yeah.
Oh, my. It's taken me far.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, Daniel, it's been a pleasure to spend time with you and to talk about your projects.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really nice.
We really appreciate it. And when you have the Bashir story done, come back and talk to us. If you want to come back when you release Resolute to the public outside of the film festivals, please come back. If you have anything to pimp out in the future, please let me know and we'll get you back in
Well, I really appreciate that. And if anybody's interested, they can go to the website. It's www.loudroarproductions.com. And you can sort of take a look at some of the films we've done, watch some of them, and see synopsises and trailers for the other ones. So I certainly encourage that. And again, any feedback from this conversation, there's a contact link on the website, so I encourage you to.
And for you guys that haven't seen any of this stuff yet and you're going to go look at it after we close the show, you are going to be shocked at the quality. The quality is fantastic.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure spending time with Daniel on Beyond the Mundane radio show, and we'll be back next week. You'll be listening to Beyond the Mundane on realityradio101.com, and we'll see you next week.
And next week we have David LaBelle on.
We were at a party.
You've been listening to Beyond the Mundane with your hosts, Elsie Lynn Leyland and Randi St. Clair, right here on Reality Radio 101. Stay tuned, the best pop and rock music ever recorded, right here on your internet radio station, Reality Radio 101.